Hello. I'm gonna just turn my camera now off because I'm just gonna run off and go make myself a coffee. But nice to see you. I'm in mid coffee break mode. See you in a minute.
No, I'm just going to
Hi,
let
hi, hi. Hey.
it's Megan and Marta are doing the. Sorry, it's me. I'm a bit late here. Um,
Hello.
Hi both. Sorry, it's my fault. I was a bit late getting here. Do you want to have a go at just sharing your screens quickly?
Yeah, give me one moment and I'll go ahead and open that up. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Marta, do you want to have a go at sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'll try.
Cool. Do you have a preference, Megan, Marta, who goes first? I think Marta, I put you as first, but do you mind who goes first?
I think I was planning to go first, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Great.
Cool. I'm just going to share my screen just to get the things up again. This one. To update this. Oh.
Thanks for sharing, by the way, Josh. Much
It's fine. I
appreciated.
just realized I didn't update this. I'm just gonna.
You got 2 minutes to figure it out, right?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just do. I won't. I'm really sorry. I won't have your names. There we go. But you'll have your own names at the start very soon, so that's fine.
That's all right.
Okay. Cool. So if I put this onto slideshow.
Josh, do you want to copy and paste their names from the next slide so that it looks like?
Sure. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah. It's a smart. Oh, brilliant! Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. Do from beginning. Nice. Okay, should we let everyone in maybe? Do that. Megan, Marta, just to let you know, it will be recorded today, if that's okay with you.
Yep.
We get started maybe. Okay, cool. Let's get started. Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to the second week. Our demo is okay if you. Yeah, fine if you do. Okay. That's okay. Cool. Hi all. Welcome to the second week of the ECR webinar series. So today we have the equity theme. So we're going to have two presentations today. So the first one from Megan at the University of Strathclyde, and the second one from Marta, also at the University of Strathclyde. Brilliant. So last week we had a really good set of presentations from Mathilde and Manon, and there's going to be some reflections on those coming out in the next EDRC monthly newsletter. Also, the recording and transcript of that is available now, so please feel free to watch that if you missed that last week. So coming up after the Easter break, we have talks from Madeleine Polka at the University of Sussex and Dr. Catherine Sugar at the University of Manchester for the place theme. And then for the Thursday, 8th of May, we have two from the futures theme. So we have Fed and we have Emeka from UCL. So we're still looking for two speakers from the flexibility theme. And it would probably have to be the Thursday, the 15th of May, if you're interested. So please let either myself, Klinos, or Megan know if you'd like that. Brilliant. Okay, so I shall now hand over to Megan to start.
All right. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Give me one moment and I will share my screen and get that presentation up and running. For anyone who I haven't met yet, my name is Megan, and I am a PhD researcher here at the Center for Energy Policy through the University of Strathclyde. So my talk today is called At the Intersection of Fuel Poverty and Heating Decarbonization Policy, Aims and Unintended Impacts in Scotland, which may be a bit of a misnomer, but you will see. So for starters, I think I'm frozen one moment. Here we go. My overarching research question is, how will different policy and regulatory actions affect energy prices and affordability for fuel poverty in Scotland? Let's see. Can you all hear me okay, I'm wondering?
We can. It's a little bit crackly, but we can hear what you're saying.
Okay, I will try to speak slowly. Unfortunately, the internet might not be the best. So, for starters, the EDRC has many different researchers looking at fuel poverty and energy vulnerability across many different levels. But as you can see from my research question, I am very specifically focused on the Scottish context. And when talking about the Scottish context, it's very important, I think, to understand that it is settled within the wider UK context. And some of the big differences here is the different definitions between what the Scottish government defines as fuel poor and what the UK government defines. I think the key differences, and here you can see the definitions, is so for the Scottish government, if you are spending 10% or more of your net income after you paid for your household costs, and that remaining amount of income, approximately 90%, isn't enough to maintain a certain standard of living, you are considered fuel poor. And if you're spending up to 20% of your household income on energy, then you are in extreme fuel poverty. In comparison, the UK government's is much more based around the sort of like EPC, where if a household is in a property that is energy efficiency rating D or below, and then they still do not have the required amount to heat their home, they are in fuel poverty. And I think the key differences, or the key things to take away from these two differing definitions, is this 10% metric versus this low income, low energy efficiency metric. And it's important to discuss the different definitions because these definitions kind of set the aims of policy and the way policy is going to try to focus for goals and the way the different fuel poverty is measured. And so also when we're looking at this 10% metric versus the low income, low energy efficiency focus, it relates to the different fuel poverty drivers. And so for my research, since I am doing the Scottish context, it's important to note that I am using the Scottish kind of 10% metric as well as the Scottish government's defined drivers of fuel poverty, you see listed here, for my focus. And so that 10% metric is going to kind of help drive a lot of policy to focus more on high energy cost and low income drivers of fuel poverty, where that UK-wide government definition focusing on the EPC home standards is going to kind of drive policy that focuses more on poor energy efficiency in homes. as the different drivers, or the way the different policies are kind of impacting the different drivers. So here you can see graphic design is my passion. I have listed different drivers of fuel poverty as defined by the Scottish government. And this is not an exhaustive kind of list of the different policies that exist within the Scottish energy policy landscape, but this is just sort of representative to kind of give a visualization connecting how these different policies potentially address these different drivers. And you can kind of see overwhelmingly that a significant amount of existing policies are connected to the poor energy efficiency of home drivers. I think a few other things that are interesting here is you can also see how some policies do have overlapping drivers that they might partially address. ECO, the energy company obligation being a big one, and the warm home discounts as well. But some is intervention policy. These interventions that are meant to kind of impact directly or indirectly the poor energy efficiency of homes. I've heard again that you guys can't potentially hear me. Did I lose you all?
Yeah, Megan, you're breaking up quite a lot. Do you want to just ask colleagues if they could just hang on for 2 minutes and you can run in and jump on my computer?
Yeah, I think if that's okay, I am going to stop sharing and I will be right.
She could also try not being on camera. That might work.
Yeah.
Oh.
Then we might lose her slide.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Yeah, she's literally like next door. So if colleagues just want to hold on for a wee minute, she'll come into my computer. Everybody, we're just getting this set up. We're with you in 1 minute.
I'm sorry, everybody, for making you wait, but we're going to kind of try and speed through the rest of this. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay now. I'm going to keep my camera off. We're going to hope that that just kind of solves things. So I appreciate your patience as we figure this out. Thank you. Glad to hear it, Sarah. So I think where I left off was here, discussing the different drivers of fuel poverty and how they are related to different policies that exist within the energy policy landscape. So, can you hear me better okay now?
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. So, quick summary. We're going to skip through all this. Great. So, these policies I have included here on this chart. Interesting.
Just share your screen.
Yeah. So the policies I have included here on this chart are the different policies that exist either within the Scottish landscape or the UK landscape, but they all impact Scotland. So I think something that's interesting of note here is how you can see that the different drivers are, most of them seem to impact, or most of the policies seem to be related to this driver of poor energy efficiency in homes. And I think that's interesting to note. Similar things that are of interest to note is policies that impact multiple drivers. So ECO, the energy company obligation, is a great one, or the warm homes discount. I think something that kind of early research findings are starting to indicate is that even for a lot of these drivers focusing on poor energy efficiency in homes, there is an indirect effect there of kind of hoping to impact energy bills or impact low incomes or high energy costs by effectively lowering energy bills for households by having more energy efficient homes, whether that is through measures such as installing insulation in exterior walls or installing low carbon boilers or more energy efficient boilers. So while there's all these lovely policies, which later you're going to see the specific documents I'm looking at for these policies, what's more interesting potentially is how I've grouped these policies by mechanism. And mechanisms I'm kind of using here are to mean the different tools a policy or an intervention uses to impact either directly or indirectly affordability and energy costs. And I've widely grouped those different policies into these mechanisms, including heating decarbonization and energy efficiency, which I am kind of including together because they both aim to effectively lower energy bills. And similarly, fiscal interventions are going to be interventions that are majority government funded, such as tax rebates or energy subsidies and direct bill support. These are going to be mostly associated with low incomes and impacting the incomes of households. Pricing, I think it's important to note, is a reserved competency to the UK government, but it does still affect significantly Scottish households. And so it's also worth looking at because it's anything that is affecting that per unit cost of electricity or energy. And then the energy supplier activities, these are those interventions that kind of directly involve the activities of companies supplying household energy to households. So why am I looking at all of these things? Well, what's important is at the end stage of all of this is I'd like to understand the outcomes. I want to be able to look at these policies and understand what the aim of a policy is versus what it actually does. So that could be looking at aims in comparison to unintended consequences, or if we're being a bit optimistic, co-benefits of the research, which brings me to what am I looking at now? So my current sub-research question that I'm looking at is how do the changing aims of policies in the energy policy landscape reflect the barriers and challenges those policies face to implementation? Well, the way I'm doing this is I'm kind of doing a document analysis and critical analysis. I'm trying to take a just transitions framework with an energy justice lens to look at these documents where I am working on a thematic coding. It is a deductive style thematic coding based on my literature review. So some of the codes and subcodes I have so far is looking at things like the explicitly stated aims versus implied aims. Eligibility criteria comes up a lot, locality. So Scotland versus England and rural versus urban. And this whole point of this is I want to do a critical analysis to kind of evaluate gaps and biases, to understand the implementation challenges, because I am hoping to gain a clear understanding of the energy policy landscape in Scotland and to identify those gaps to the gaps that exist at that intersection of heating decarbonization and fuel poverty policy. So here is a beautiful table, and you can kind of see under the policy, these are the different policies I've chosen to be sort of like archetypes for their given mechanism. So to look at the energy supplier mechanism, I'm of course looking at ECO, the energy company obligation. The associated driver that it's mainly impacting would be poor energy efficiency in homes. And the documents I'm analyzing to kind of represent ECO at the moment is that ECO 3 final determination report and the design of the energy company obligation. So I'm looking at a lot of government responses to policy consultations. For low or fiscal interventions, I'm looking at the Warm Homes Discount Scheme, but I'm also looking at the pension age winter heating payment because it is specific to Scotland. So I think it really fits well within my Scottish context focus. And a lot of fiscal interventions, like I said before, are kind of really focusing on low incomes. I'm looking at the energy price cap for pricing. Something that's interesting here is that the energy price cap does not have the explicit aim of impacting affordability for fuel poor households, but that is one of the unintended consequences and one of those kind of like unintended impacts that I think is really interesting to analyze. And then for energy efficiency and heating decarbonization, I'm looking at the new build heat standard because once again, that is something that exists within the devolved powers of Scotland. So if you have any final documents that you think I could add to this chart, I would love to hear it, because the whole point of me doing this is to really understand those aims and unintended impacts of these policies within the Scottish context of energy policy. And with that, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your patience. If you have any questions or if you have any ideas, please get in touch or let me know now. Thank you.
Hi, Megan. Thanks very much for that. That was really good and really well done persevering, given that really stressful when these things happen. So yeah, you did really well on that. So perhaps do we have any questions? So feel free to sort of put your hand up and ask them or to put them in the chat.
I think it may be worth you noting to the rest of the group about how Energy Action Scotland are helping support your PhD and how you'll be going on to do other applied work.
I think that is a great point. Thank you, Karen. Yes, so Energy Action Scotland is the external sponsor for my research. And for a lot of that means that I get to have a lot of stakeholder engagement with the non-for-profit sector, and I'm getting a lot of help from this external organization to get kind of an insider perspective on the lived experiences of fuel poor households in Scotland, which is going to be very helpful for my future research. So yes, I do see a few hands that are up. Catherine?
Hi, Megan. That was really great. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed listening about how you're going to tackle this huge topic, really. I used to live in Scotland and worked at the University of Edinburgh, so I'm sort of familiar with what you were talking about, and Scotland's a really interesting example to look at. So I was just wondering, and I don't know if you've come to this stage within your research, so my apologies if you haven't, sorry, but could you maybe talk a little bit about the just transition lens and the energy justice angle that you're planning on using? Like, who are the main sort of authors in your work, or how you're planning on using those frameworks in your analysis? Yeah, as I said, I don't know if you've come to that stage, but that would be great. Thank you.
No, that's great. I'm happy to talk about it briefly. So I have so one of my other supervisors who's not part of the EDRC is Kirsten Jenkins. So inevitably, she is one of the very big author within the energy justice kind of concept and frameworks. So that's going to be a natural part to play. But for me, the just transitions lens that I want to use is, from my perspective, the energy transition has to happen, and it is happening. And I think the equity team does a great job of really verbalizing how we must ensure that it happens in a way that doesn't leave vulnerable households behind. And therefore, any policy or solutions that are going to be crafted or pushed for have to take into considerations the well-beings of everyone, including the most vulnerable in society. And so an energy justice specific kind of lens and focus within that is sort of understanding that energy is a commodity, and much like any other type of vulnerability or poverty, it does come from a unequal distribution of these commodities. So by understanding energy in this way, I think it helps to shape the kind of proposals I'm going to put forward in the future. So thank you.
Brilliant. I'll take the question next from Sarah and then from Tim.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. Can you hear me? Yes, great. Sorry, I'm using headphones, which I don't normally do. I was interested in the definition. So I think, if I'm right, it used to be the case that in England, the definition was more similar to the current Scottish one, with the 10% of your household income being spent. And then there's been quite a lot of, well, a bit of an uproar about the change in definition. But just looking at it from the point of view of an EDRC person, where we're interested in reducing energy demand, I mean, clearly we are interested in making households more fuel efficient, right? I mean, that's a good thing from our perspective. So I just wonder what how you're navigating that, because we don't want to suggest that. I mean, we would suggest that most fuel poverty, or that people in fuel poverty are underusing energy, but at the same time, they're going to need a lot of energy to heat an inefficient house. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting kind of thing that you've got to navigate there. I'm just interested in your reflections, I guess.
Yeah, so I think I kind of have a few initial thoughts on that. I think as far as the differing and the changing definitions for the English definition, I need to do research to find more concrete data to support this thought, but I do have some initial thoughts that maybe that the kind of EPC standard definition is easy to achieve increasing incomes or lowering energy prices. And since it's something potentially easier to achieve or easier to measure, that sort of definition makes it easier to look like we are, the royal we, on a UK-wide level, are succeeding at fuel poverty or diminishing and mitigating it. So that's one part. I think specifically focusing on energy efficiency measures is kind of considered a silver bullet solution, but part of the early findings I'm having is that a lot of the energy efficiency sort of measures have really strict criteria thresholds, which for eligibility for people in households to apply for those things, which can be unfair, and people fall through the gaps there. And also, by focusing on energy efficiency, that you can have an EPC, like, as far as the English definition goes, a non-fuel poor home that still is spending more than 10% of their income on energy. So I think we can't just focus on energy efficiency. While it is very important and while it does offer a lot of co-benefits, solutions need to be more comprehensive. And also, I think area-based schemes and place-based solutions is going to play a major role in my research going forward. So I hope that answered that.
It does. Just to follow up, I'm sure you're aware of Brenda Boardman, but if you want to,
Yeah.
if you're interested in speaking to her and would like an introduction, I can probably sort that out for you.
Sarah, I would love that.
Okay,
I'll send you an email. Thank you
send
so
me an
much.
email. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
We've probably got time for a couple of quick questions before we move on. So Tim, I'll let you ask yours first.
Hi, Megan. Yeah, thanks so much for the talk. Really interesting. I mean, one of the things I was interested was this, that you're looking at both energy efficiency policies and heat decarbonisation policies. And I'm not sure whether you had the boiler upgrade scheme in there, but it's sort of interesting because that's more aimed at middle class people. Basically, it's not aimed at fuel poverty because people in fuel poverty, because heat pumps are still relatively expensive. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because then, you know, if those people help to bring the costs down of heat pumps, then they might be more affordable in future. So, but I think it's sort of interesting to sort of reflect on that, or sort of, you know, how you think about that relation between energy efficiency policies and heat decarbonisation policies.
Yeah, so for the sake of how I've grouped my mechanisms, I am grouping the heating decarbonization policies and the energy efficiency policies together. The chart I have and the fun little infographic was not all inclusive, because I understand that even policies I'm looking at now might not be pushed through, or might be taken back, or will inevitably change as I'm going through my research. That said, if you want to drop it in the chat, I'm going to go through afterwards and I'll take notes from any suggestions people have for policies to look for or documents. I think all of it could be quite interesting and is potentially relevant to my research. So, but as far as keeping the heating decarbonization, energy efficiency policies grouped together as a mechanism, it is because a lot of them sort of have the tool that is used to impact fuel poor households and energy affordability there is that regardless of if it is a new boiler or that insulation in a loft, it is effectively trying to lower the overall energy bills in the home, from my understanding. But I'm always, you know, ready to read more and learn more, so I'd be happy to read about that.
Brilliant, thank you. So just Helen, you've got time just to ask your question very quickly, and perhaps send a quick response to Helen, Megan.
Yeah, it was an observation. So first of all, apologies if you already covered it, because I missed a couple of little bits of your presentation. It was just about when you first put up the initial sort of figure. There's so many different policies and ways that people can access funding for whatever, that it's just incredibly confusing. And if it's confusing for us, it just must be even worse. You know, if you're talking about just people in general who don't have any idea about the energy or energy industry or all these institutions, are you going to cover that in any way about, you know, how can we keep this simple? How can we make, you know, how can we do something that's simple that will also be equitable and have justice implications?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from going through this research process, I can say that it is not easy to find these policy documents, and it's not easy to understand them. And I've spent many hours reading them at this point. So I hope, you know, that at the end of this research project, at the end of my PhD, I will have a beautiful, really straightforward, clear, and easy to understand policy package. Helen, you can hold me to that. It's something I'm hoping for, but at this point, I think it is something, access to information is a really important part of this whole solution. And I think, unfortunately, I'm probably about out of time, but thank you all so much for the questions, and thank you for your comments. It's all really helpful.
Yes, and if anyone has any kind of further questions or comment for Megan, please feel free to put those in the chat or email her after. Brilliant. So now if we have Marta giving her presentation.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, it was easier if you spoke a bit more into your speaker. It was a bit quiet the first time you said it.
Okay, so if at any moment you cannot hear me properly, please interrupt me, and I will try to adjust the audio.
Okay.
And I hope you can see my presentation. Okay, wonderful. So first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity, as I just started actually my PhD. I started at the beginning of February. So what you will see today, it's a bit of a preliminary work and a bit of reframing the scope of my project. One thing that I would like to highlight is that today I will go through the questions I've been trying to reframe within my scope of work, and these questions have been changing on a daily basis, depending on the literature I've been reviewing, on the data I find, on observations, on discussions. I expect that these questions and these preliminary thinking will change even after this webinar. So please feel free to give any suggestion, any feedback, because at this stage it is crucial for me to really go and to really use to reframe the scope of work. Okay, so first of all, what is my research question? And it is understanding the barriers of adopting energy efficiency improvement in residential properties, and what are the economy-wide implications of addressing them. So first of all, we can frame this scope of work into main areas: understanding the barriers and understanding the implications of addressing them. However, what I wanted to do today was to actually try to look at this from an equity perspective. And in order to do this, I look at what is the aim of the equity team. And I wanted to highlight several keywords that to me are important: vigorous and interdisciplinary action, different energy demand solutions, and striving for a more equitable future. This has led me to reframe my work on the basis of three main points. So within vigorous, I want to look for solid data that are based on observation, that are based on the collection of official data sets, but also, as we will see in the methodology part, even engaging stakeholders and understanding their experiences. A mixed methodology approach, because we are talking about understanding the barriers and understanding the implications. So we cannot look at this question from just one point of view. We need to adopt a mixed approach in order for it to be more round, if we want to say. And we want to strive for a more equitable future. What does it mean? It means keeping in mind the individual characteristics of households, of people that are behind the numbers, and energy justice themes. So how can we do this while not leaving anyone behind? Within each of the two main research areas, I am currently trying to understand and to ask myself questions and to prioritize what is important in this phase. So first of all, we need to understand what kind of improvements are most impactful and which of them should be the focus of the research. This is because there are several types of energy efficiency policies that can be adopted by governments. And we are talking about regulatory measures. We are talking about economic and financial mechanism. And the first of them is, of course, the ECO, the energy company obligation. And we have soft approaches. For example, I am thinking about making it easier for people to access and, for example, help towards the access, so know-how on how to access the policies. While regulatory measures, I'm thinking about, for example, obligations to reach a certain level of EPC rating by a certain year. So it's not an economic mechanism, but it is the law that establishes a goal up to a certain date. And in these cases, yes, for a financial mechanism, it is easy to assess the impact in a way that is backed by data. But how can we actually understand what is the impact of energy efficiency policies, for example, when it comes to soft approaches? And in this scenario, also, we need to understand that individual households can adopt different improvements based on different cost levels. So, for example, high capital intensive measures like retrofit, but also very low capital intensive measures like, for example, changing the light bulbs. How can we assess the propensity to adopt these measures, and how can we assess the impact on household bills? Obviously, we cannot assess all these improvements, all these actions, so we need to understand which are the most important. And then what we need to assess what are the typical barriers. So, for example, is the geographical distribution of households a barrier to accessing different measures? Is there any correlation between the propensity to adopt specific improvements and the individual characteristics? And is any groups more exposed to barriers, or maybe they have found a way to overcome these barriers? And if these correlations exist, how can we put the analysis into quantitative terms? Because at the end of the day, what we need to do is also understand these impacts in terms of what are the implications economy-wide and which sectors are most likely to be impacted. So, for example, is the building sector ready to do all the interventions that are required, for example, from the regulatory point of view, to bring all the households to a certain EPC level? What are the impacts in terms of needing to train workers? And what are the current directions of the government? Because we are seeing different kind of levels, for example, future levels for financing welfare measures. And what is the impact of these in terms of future direction of energy efficiency actions by households? What all of these analyses will lead to is understanding the impact on the wider economy. So we are talking about GDP, and we are talking about a different kind of economic and financial mechanisms. So, for example, loans, grants, what is their impact? What is the impact of the different duration and financing structures? In this sense, I am thinking about the work that has been done by the CEP, and in terms, for example, of different kind of duration access. And then how do these measures impact the population? So what is the impact on different levels of income? Does the impact change if we switch from a countrywide assessment to a more geographical based, or if we consider, for example, characteristics related to energy poverty? And in particular, these last two, I wanted to focus a bit on these last few points before passing to methodology, which I am planning on adopting. And the first point here is that different policies are adopted in a different way over the country. And here it can be seen clearly from the map of households which were in the receipt of eco measures over the areas. For example, we can see a prevalence of adoption of the eco measures in Scotland and in Wales, also because of the structuring. And how can we map the impact of different types of policies? So not only the access to financing mechanism, but also I'm thinking about soft approaches measures. Is it possible to actually assess how they have a different effect in different areas. If there is a different rate of adoption, is there any local experience from which we can learn? Is there any virtuous example that can be translated into a broader policy? And last point is, what is the current status of dwellings? Because we need to take into account, if we are looking at energy efficiency improvements, the question is the whole country at the same level? As Megan has told during the presentation, which was very precious, we have different level of energy poverty over the country, and in all the regions we have a different kind of definition for energy poverty. And if we want to look at what is being done in order also to not forget people behind, how can we compare different energy poverty rates to assess the impact of energy efficiency policies? Is there any way we can have a homogeneous assessment? Also, because if we think about, for example, EPC ratings, so we have a different methodology when it comes to England, Wales, and Scotland. So how can we actually assess on a country level how these measures are being carried out if we do not have an homogeneous framework? And then we have the issue of intersectionality and correlations. When we look at the adoption of different strategies, we should not forget that there are people behind numbers, that there are people behind experiences. And so what is that actually has an impact on whether people decide to access a measure or not? For example, I'm thinking about disability and the need to have warmer houses for certain kind of health conditions. I'm thinking about ethnicity and the difficulty, for example, of really understanding maybe a policy which is difficult to read even for those who have proficiency in English. I'm thinking about education level, and I'm thinking about income in terms of do people have time to read and to research what is available to them as policy? Or maybe it's not as much a problem of knowledge, of understanding, but know-how on how to access. So how can we assess the impact of different intersectional characteristics? And this brings me to the last point, which is what is the methodology which I expect to use during my research. And you can see here that I divided it into 2 columns, but the point is that they feed each other, and they will be carried out in parallel. So what is the outcome? What is the results from one analysis will be used to redirect or to reframe the questions into the other macro area. So first of all, and it is the phase that I'm currently in, is a literature review. So understanding what is the current status of research and what is the current directions. We were talking about directions of the government, what is changing, and collecting data in order to understand what are the barriers, and in order to understand what are the impacts, we need data. So what is out there, what is available, but also, is it possible to get the evidence directly from the population, and how can stakeholders be involved in a way that is beneficial for both sides? So how can we listen to them, and how can they listen to us? As in terms also of reinstating a kind of trust in research, and a kind of trust in a possible impact for them. And then an analysis, so an empiric analysis of this evidence, which will be collected and is being collected, and putting it into a map. Here I'm speaking about geospatial analysis, and also what I think it's also map a conceptual map. So if we go back to the intersectionality, is mapping what are the characteristics and how they can how they tell the same story. In terms of economy-wide implications, the main analysis will be done through the computable general equilibrium model, so a macroeconomic model with the possibility, if data allow, to introduce a regional detail level. So understanding in terms of what are the difference between England, Scotland, and Wales for the moment, and hopefully in the future also starting mapping Northern Ireland. Here you will see a interface integration with agent-based model simulations, question mark, because this is a possible solution which I've been considering. But on this point, I'm absolutely open to any feedback, and I'm absolutely open to any experience on the matter. And also, if there is any suggestion, any observation on what has been framed until now, things that might come to your eye, which is way more trained on spotting this kind of possible interactions, please feel free to let me know and to give any feedback. And thank you for your attention. Yep.
Because then we can all hear the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Marta. That was a really enjoyable presentation, and it was just sort of, I think, using the kind of the intersectional analysis was making me think.
Marta's just going to sit down at my computer, so we've just got one sound. You can take your earphones out and then you can hear through them.
I think we can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. I was just saying thank you.
Hold on, it's going to put that back on. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, Marta's just come over to sit at my desk so we can all hear the questions.
No worries. Thank you, Marta. That was a really great presentation. It's really interesting to hear how your research is developing. It's also making me think about, with the use of the intersectional analytical perspective, thinking about the presentation we had last week from Manon and Mathilde, and I think definitely it's worth sort of connecting about them. And I'd be keen to kind of hear in a bit more detail how you're thinking of kind of operationalizing intersectional analytical perspective in the two, in both your kind of literature review and your kind of analysis there, but also in the CG model that you're going to use as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of CG model, that is the main barrier, and that is why I'm considering of a mixed approach in terms of modeling. Yeah, that is as the main question that has me banging my head against a wall in the last couple of months, and it is how can we put into data something that is qualitative. Mapping and trying to understand from a geospatial analysis is the first thing that came to my mind. For example, understanding what are the trends in terms of maybe neighborhoods, but also areas, for example, where a characteristic is prevalent, and trying to understand whether there is data out there on, for example, if we have a policy, can we look into what are different access rates from straight of population? And here the problem is privacy, and here the problem is ethics. So there is a lot of question about how to do that, and that is, I think, what will change multiple times over the next couple of years at least.
Brilliant, thank you. Do we have any questions at all from anyone? Please feel free to raise your hand or to put a question in the chat. So we have a comment from Christian sort of suggesting to look at the geospatial carbon place calculator that Malcolm's developing at the University of Leeds. I don't know if there's something you had a look at yet, but it could be interesting. I think especially with that, looking at the kind of the geographical spatial dimension of the analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christian, for the suggestion. I will absolutely look into it.
Yes, actually, next one.
Yeah,
Marta, I wonder if you could just describe a bit more sort of your next steps. I'm sure I imagine you're getting ready for your upgrade and just sort of how that kind of you're kind of looking now to take your work forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step I'm planning on right now is to start modeling and to start building a CG run in order to assess different policies and different structures, and trying to gather data to incorporate the analysis into the different regions in order to build an integrated model, which is not which does not take into consideration an homogeneous United Kingdom, but which can reflect the various part of the country. So currently, yes, I'm focusing on the more economic side of the analysis.
Brilliant. Obviously, perhaps I don't know if in what's encountering, but obviously by focusing on the different countries, data is collected in quite different ways. I don't know sort of kind of what your experiences of trying to bring together sort of quite different data sets into a kind of a homogeneous model.
Finding data which speak to one another, it is something difficult, and here is also a matter of when is it okay to stop and which data are good enough. Because I think one of the main problems when doing research is I will never have the perfect data. How do I know that this data is ideal? And when is that data good enough for me to stop and start doing the analysis, also to bring an impact, also to start thinking about it and to start putting it into practice? So yeah, finding a way to, for example, to find common points. And that I'm thinking mostly, for example, about the question of fuel poverty. How can we compare data, or also about EPC ratings? Is there any way to put characteristics? For that is still an open question. I have to admit openly, it is still an open question. I do not have a more complete answer for you. I'm really sorry at this stage.
That's okay at all. I think we've got a question here from Megan.
Yeah, hi. So, when discussing the definitions of fuel poverty, I would like to know, what do you feel like if you had to pick one specific definition within the UK context, because as I discussed and as you also brought up, there isn't really one UK-wide accepted definition. What would you like the main metric to be, or what definition are you thinking you're going to follow for your research?
Thank you for your question, Megan. And right now, the definition I'm looking at is the 10%, the one I'm thinking about applying, in terms of it being more equiparable. Sorry, I cannot remember the word in English right now, but to be compared among Wales, Scotland, and maybe in the future on Northern Ireland. So yeah, right now I'm giving preference to the 10% income definition. But I will be really open to discussing it also with you, to possibly find a way to find coherent definition which can be applied, even though it might not be the official one and it might never become the official one, but understanding what is important, what are the characteristics. Maybe we need to check some boxes in terms of characteristics. What are the individual specifics which actually affect the ability to be in a warm enough home? So yeah.
I can see Catherine's just kind of made a comment which kind of was building to a question I asked, was I was thinking about, which is that I think the policy audience for the research, I know it's kind of early days, but who uses policy audience? I know Catherine's mentioned that a few at EDRC are working on a fuel poverty consultation draft, so she was suggesting that you might be interested in getting involved in that. But yes, any kind of sort of final reflections on who you see as the policy audience for this analysis?
Yeah, I'm planning on reading it, and I'm not sure any of my observation will actually be thoughtful enough to make it to the final consultation response. But I'm still reading it, and I will make sure to also speak with Anna and Sarah to.
I think he's also asking, who do you see as the ultimate policy audience for your work?
Okay, so as for the ultimate policy audience, in terms of analysis, I'm hoping to involve the government. I think that is, the dream we will have, that our work will be seen by the government and that we will be listened to. But one other thing I would really like to do at the end of my PhD is to involve local communities and to make them feel heard, to make them feel listened to, and to really understand what is the local experience. Because until the day these measures, this policy will be structured from high above, without seeing, for example, what is the impact on the local fabric, we will not have the results we need to have. So engaging stakeholders and having them a recipient of my analysis is also something that I strive to.
Brilliant. That sounds really exciting, and yes, I hope it's all kind of goes well over the next little while for the research. Anyway, so I think we're coming to the end here. So I want to just thank Marta and Megan again for two really good presentations, and just remind everyone that we'll be back after a bit of a break for Easter on the 1st of May for the two presentations from the PLACE team, which will be Catherine and Madeline. Get that right there. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.